after what was a rather brilliant performance by my good friend and often co-commentator Grandmaster Robert Hess in round 7. Unfortunately, in his own words, he just didn't have it today. Sometimes, as he said, you kind of go to the office, but you don't really feel like working. You still got to make chess moves when you're there. Unfortunately for him, he did go down against Israeli Grandmaster Tamir Nabati in round 8 at the FIDE Chess.com Grand Swiss, but not so surprising and not so unfortunate for him. He's an amazing, humble human being who self-reflective enough to actually suggest to me that I make a video here on his loss, or I wouldn't be doing it. But okay, here we go. We're going to take a look at what happened, maybe try to provide some analysis that shows that my buddy's position wasn't so bad, and obviously learn a few things along the way. So let's dive in. In this position, Robert played castles long, which is where we start after a pretty standard, kind of ready, semi-Slav sort of approach. As Robert said, this is one of those days where, you know, your head isn't working and you make a move that you know kind of isn't good, but you're like, well, it looks interesting, I'll go for it. Certainly, white should probably just be developing naturally and castling short. But credit Nabati, the moment Robert wants a fight, Nabati opens up the position and goes for the fight. He takes on c4. Sometimes you don't want to change a central pawn structure when your opponent has the potential of getting 2 pawns versus kind of 1 in the center. But when it comes with tempi on one particular flank or wing of the board and the kings are on opposite sides of the board, that's a bit of a game changer, right? So recognizing that by Nabati, taking on c4 against principles, helping Robert develop, and then quickly attacking makes a lot of sense. So he plays b5, he plays a5, Robert plays g4, a good move. You're kind of calling into question that you don't really want to take the pawn. But after g6, Robert makes probably his worst move of the game, because the moves later on, unfortunately, maybe couldn't really get him back in any way. He played the move g5. Now, as he said, he didn't think that my suggestion of h4 really offered that much more, but I got set to try to prove him wrong, not just to prove him wrong, but to see what would have happened. I did come up with some interesting points, which is that on the one hand, h4 is a little more flexible. And one of the key lines is that if black just goes straight forward for the attack, we have kind of a surprising approach, which is that when we trade on a3, we sort of abandon ship on the queen side, running the king over all the way to a square like e2, where there are threats all over the place, like h takes g6 twice with the bishop and the queen enters. There isn't a ton of clear ways for black to get in, and there's moves like rook d to g1 coming as well. So that's the line that proves my story right, if I'm telling the good version, right? But twist ending, black doesn't have to play that way. The problem really with h4 is that if black takes the much more sort of principled approach, which is just bishop b7, and then the move that you always want in these structures, which is c5, suddenly we realize why that g-pawn shouldn't have moved in these positions. One variation I gave is that h5, c5, exclam. You have to play a move like d5 to try to block it. And black can play the move c4, sacrificing on the queen side and just getting a ton of tempi. This is exactly the kind of chess you want to play when the kings are on opposite sides of the board. So this would have been good for Nabati either way. So turns out, as usual in our relationship, Robert was right, I'm wrong. Usually you think I'm talking about my wife when I say she's right, I'm wrong, but Robert's kind of my chess commentary broadcast life partner. I won't say wife. So anyway, Robert was right, I was wrong. It doesn't mean that g5 was any better, and he did agree with that. After g5, the real issue is that the knight comes to d5, and I'm threatening things like knight to b4, so you have to play a move that you would never want to play with your king sitting on the c-file, which is take on d5. And of course, taking on d5 with the c-pawn is what Nabati does, because winning this pawn is hardly relevant at this point. I'm just going to develop an attack on the queen side. Takes, rook d3, makes sense, you're trying to over-defend. a4, king to b1. I did analyze in my blog the move rook c3 instead of king b1, but black was better no matter what. One of the key points is that at some point there's a shot like f6 and you expose both sides of the board, so you can check out the analysis at the blog if you're interested. A takes b3, takes rook fa8, and on rook c3 we see Nabati really turn on some awesome technique. He plays knight to b6, and now rook c1 is played. Probably Robert's last fun chance was to play the move rook c5 and hope that black takes it and gives us the diagonal. Okay, Nabati wouldn't have done this, but this is what you want when your friends play chess, is for them to get ideas like this. The problem with rook c5 is actually black just plays something like queen b7, and then you end up bringing the knight to c4 in very similar fashion as you did in the game. Real quick, if you didn't get the memo, if you take the knight, it's checkmate on a1. That's kind of the key point of what's happening here. So these sort of problems are really what's in store for Robert. He played rook c1. The queen came over anyway. Once again, we're threatening rook a1 check, where after the trade, it will be queen captures and mate. So Robert tries to free a king run. Unfortunately, the body's too good for that. Now he goes to the second rank instead, and then brings this knight to c4. Robert could have resigned, but in the end, we'll show the line he did all the way out, which is that he allowed the king to be chased, hoping maybe he'll get some material for the queen if black does things like rook takes d3. Not bad, right? Problem is Nabati plays queen a8 check first, which would force the king away and win the king for free. And so Mr. Hess had to resign in this position. So an unfortunate one, as Robert said in the end. Sometimes you do your best, but they put your king on e4, and it's not because you won the game and they're signaling the DGT board. And that's pretty much what happened here today. So hopefully you're enjoying these videos, Missed on the Isle. And if you're watching this live on the broadcast, see you later. If you're not watching this live on the broadcast, here's our shout out to the broadcast daily. Go check it out at Chess.com TV, because we got to find out who's going to win this event, take a spot in the candidates, and then maybe challenge Magnus Carlsen. Thanks for being here. Give us all those share things that they do on social media. We hope you're appreciating the insights into these videos, and I will see you around on Chess.com.